The White House just out with a new blistering response for Democrats after they released emails written by Jeffrey Epstein that reference President Trump. Here's Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
It is not a coincidence that the Democrats leaked these emails to the fake news this morning ahead of Republicans reopening the government.
Why are White House officials then meeting with Representative Boebert in an effort to try and get her to not sign this petition calling for the release of the files?
Doesn't it show transparency that members of the Trump administration are willing to brief members of Congress whenever they please? Doesn't that show our level of transparency?
Okay, so imagine you're working in the Trump White House. You're going about your day, dealing with the usual crises and scandals, and then suddenly, word comes down. Jack Smith just dropped a new filing, a massive court filing, hundreds of pages, and it's devastating. It reveals that Trump privately admitted the election fraud claims were crazy, that he knew Sidney Powell's theories were nonsense, that he used those theories anyway to try to overturn the election. And it's all there in the filing, with witness testimony, with documentary evidence, with details that contradict everything Trump has said publicly. And suddenly, the White House is in full panic mode. Emergency meetings, strategy sessions, lawyers scrambling, press team trying to figure out how to spin this. Because this filing, these revelations, they undermine Trump's entire narrative. They show he knew he lost, knew the fraud claims were lies, and pushed them anyway. And that's criminal. That's conspiracy. That's exactly what prosecutors have been alleging, and now Smith has documented it in a court filing that everyone can read. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. The timing makes this even more explosive because Smith had to drop his criminal cases against Trump, had to dismiss the charges because Trump won the 2024 election, because DOJ policy says you can't prosecute a sitting president. But before closing the cases, Smith wrote detailed reports, filed extensive documentation, made sure the evidence was preserved, made sure the public could see what he found. And this new filing is part of that. Is Smith making the record, ensuring that even if Trump can't be prosecuted now, the truth is documented, the evidence is public, and when Trump eventually leaves office, when immunity ends, prosecutors can pick up where Smith left off, can use this evidence, can pursue charges, because the facts, as Smith says, remain unchanged, and those facts show Trump committed crimes. The filing reveals private admissions that are absolutely damaging. Trump apparently told people Sidney Powell was crazy, that her theories about voting machines and foreign interference were nonsense, that there was no evidence supporting them. And yet Trump used those theories publicly, promoted Powell, gave her access to the White House, allowed her to present her claims to the American people, all while privately admitting they were garbage. And that shows consciousness of guilt, shows Trump knew he was lying, knew the fraud claims were false, and spread them anyway. And that's what makes it criminal, because you can claim First Amendment protection for speech you believe is true, but when you knowingly spread lies to overturn an election, that's conspiracy to defraud, that's obstruction, that's crimes that can and should be prosecuted. Smith's filing details increasingly desperate plans to overturn the results. How Trump and his allies tried multiple strategies. First, they claimed fraud and filed lawsuits. When those failed, they tried to pressure state officials to change results. When that failed, they organized fake elector schemes.
In one email from 2011, Epstein writes, quote, "The dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Redacted victim spent hours at my house with him." House Oversight Republicans earlier questioned why Democrats redacted the name, saying, quote, "It's because this victim, Virginia Giuffre, publicly said that she never witnessed wrongdoing."
When that didn't work, they pressured Mike Pence to reject legitimate electoral votes. And when all else failed, they encouraged the January 6th mob to stop the certification. Each step more desperate, each step more illegal, each step documented in Smith's filing with witness testimony and evidence. And the picture that emerges is clear. Trump wasn't just exercising his right to contest an election. He was engaged in a criminal conspiracy, was trying every possible method to stay in power despite losing, was willing to subvert democracy to avoid leaving office. The filing implicates multiple co-conspirators, White House staff, DOJ officials, private lawyers, outside advisors, all working together to execute Trump's plan, all involved in various schemes. And Smith has identified them, has documented their roles, has evidence of their involvement, and while they're not named in the filing, they're described. And anyone paying attention knows who they are, knows which lawyers were pushing which theories, knows which White House aides were involved in which schemes, and that creates legal jeopardy for all of them, because they can be prosecuted, can face charges, can be forced to cooperate and testify against Trump. And that pressure, that legal exposure, it might flip some of them, might convince them to provide more evidence, to testify more completely, to help prosecutors build even stronger cases. The White House response has been defensive and panicked. They're calling the filing premature, claiming Smith is trying to influence public opinion, accusing him of releasing information during election season to damage Trump politically, and demanding that the filing be sealed or withdrawn. But those arguments ring hollow because Smith filed this in court as part of legitimate legal proceedings, following proper procedures, and the information in the filing is evidence gathered during a criminal investigation. It's not political spin, it's witness testimony and documentary proof. And the fact that it's politically damaging doesn't make it improper, doesn't mean Smith shouldn't have filed it. The job of prosecutors is to pursue justice, to document crimes, to make evidence public when appropriate. And that's what Smith did. And Trump's team attacking him for doing his job, that just makes them look guilty, makes it seem like they're afraid of what the evidence shows. Behind closed doors, White House officials are reportedly in crisis mode, trying to figure out how to respond, how to minimize damage, how to maintain Trump's narrative that he was the victim of a stolen election, when Smith's filing shows Trump knew that narrative was false. And there's no good answer, no way to spin this effectively, because the evidence is too clear, Trump's private admissions too damning, the pattern of conduct too obvious. So the White House is stuck, can't defend the conduct effectively, can't dismiss the evidence, can't make this go away. So they're just attacking Smith, attacking the process, attacking anyone who takes the evidence seriously, and hoping that partisan division will protect Trump, that Republican voters will stick with him regardless of evidence, that loyalty will trump truth. So buckle up, because we're about to break down exactly what Smith's filing reveals and why it has the White House in absolute panic. Alright, let's dig into what Jack Smith's filing actually says, because the details are devastating, the evidence is comprehensive, and the picture that emerges shows Trump engaged in a multi-month criminal conspiracy to overturn a legitimate election. So we start with Trump's private admissions about Sidney Powell. Powell was the lawyer who made the most extreme fraud claims, who alleged voting machines were rigged, who claimed foreign countries interfered, who presented theories so outlandish that even other Trump lawyers thought they were crazy. And according to Smith's filing, Trump agreed. Trump privately told people Powell's claims were nuts, that there was no evidence, that her theories didn't make sense, and yet Trump gave Powell access to the White House, let her present her theories publicly, tweeted support for her claims, used her allegations to cast doubt on election results, all while knowing, privately admitting, that her claims were false. And that shows intent, shows Trump wasn't just misled, wasn't just believing bad information. He knew it was bad, knew it was false, and used it anyway because it served his purposes. Smith documents how Trump's plans became increasingly desperate. After the election, Trump's team filed dozens of lawsuits, claimed fraud in multiple states, demanded recounts, and every lawsuit failed. Every recount confirmed Biden won. Every audit showed the results were legitimate. And Trump's own lawyers, his own campaign staff, they told him this, told him he lost, told him there was no evidence of fraud sufficient to change results. And Smith has documented those conversations, has testimony from people who were in the room, who heard Trump being told he lost, who watched him reject that reality and keep pushing fraud claims. And after the lawsuits failed, Trump tried other tactics, tried calling state officials, tried pressuring them to find votes or change results. The famous Georgia call where Trump pressured the Secretary of State to find exactly enough votes to flip the state. That wasn't an isolated incident. According to Smith's filing, that was part of a pattern. Trump made similar calls to officials in other states, used similar pressure tactics, and Smith documents all of it. The fake elector scheme gets extensive coverage. When state officials wouldn't change results, Trump's team organized alternate slates of electors, had people in states Biden won sign documents claiming they were the legitimate electors, claiming Trump won those states, and then tried to get those fake electoral votes submitted to Congress, tried to create confusion about which slate was legitimate, tried to give Mike Pence justification to reject legitimate votes. And Smith shows Trump's direct involvement, shows Trump knew about the scheme, approved it, directed it, was actively involved in executing it. And the filing includes testimony from people involved in organizing the fake electorals, people who say Trump told them to do it, people who have emails and messages showing Trump's knowledge and direction. And that's powerful evidence. That's proof of Trump's criminal intent and criminal conduct. The pressure campaign on Mike Pence is documented in detail. Trump repeatedly told Pence he had the power to reject electoral votes, to send them back to states, to delay certification. And Pence repeatedly told Trump that wasn't true, that the vice president's role is ceremonial, that he had no authority to change results. And Trump didn't care, kept pressuring Pence, kept demanding he use powers he didn't have. And when Pence refused, when he said he would follow his constitutional duty and certify the legitimate results. Trump turned on him, attacked him publicly, sicked the January 6th mob on him, and Smith documents all of this, has testimony from Pence and from Pence's staff, has messages and conversations showing Trump's pressure campaign, showing Trump knew what he was asking Pence to do was unconstitutional, but demanding it anyway. January 6th is covered extensively. Smith shows how Trump's lies about fraud created the conditions for violence, how his rally speech that morning directed the mob toward Congress, how he knew the crowd was armed and didn't care, how he watched the violence unfold on television and refused to call it off for hours, how his inaction allowed the attack to continue, how his only focus was whether the violence would help him stay in power. And Smith has testimony from White House staff, from people who were with Trump that day, who heard what he said, who watched what he did and didn't do, and their testimony paints a damning picture of a president who was willing to let violence continue if it served his purposes, who was more concerned with overturning election results than with protecting Congress or democracy. Smith emphasizes that while presidential immunity forced dismissal of charges, the facts are unchanged, the evidence still exists, the witnesses are still available, the documents are still preserved, and when Trump leaves office, when immunity ends, prosecution can resume. New charges can be filed based on this same evidence. And Smith made sure that evidence was documented, was filed with courts, was made public, so it can't be suppressed or hidden, can't be dismissed as political attacks. It's part of the official legal record, available for future prosecutors, available for historians, available for the American people to see and judge for themselves. And that's Smith's final move, his way of ensuring accountability, even when immediate prosecution isn't possible. The filing addresses presidential immunity questions, because the Supreme Court ruled that presidents have immunity for official acts, but Smith argues Trump's efforts to overturn the election weren't official acts, weren't part of presidential duties, were personal campaign conduct, were criminal schemes, and therefore not covered by immunity. And Smith makes detailed legal arguments about why immunity doesn't apply, about why Trump could and should be prosecuted for this conduct, and while those arguments didn't matter for current charges because of DOJ policy about sitting presidents, they will matter in the future, will matter when Trump leaves office, will matter for whether future prosecution can proceed. And Smith's legal analysis becomes precedent, becomes part of the conversation, becomes ammunition for future prosecutors. Trump's legal team is fighting the filing procedurally. They're arguing Smith shouldn't have filed it, that it's improper to release this information without trial, that it prejudices Trump's rights, that it's politically motivated. But courts aren't buying those arguments. Because Smith followed proper procedures, filed in connection with legitimate legal proceedings, and the information is evidence gathered during a criminal investigation. It's not gossip or speculation, it's testimony and documents. And courts have found that making such evidence public serves important interests, serves transparency, serves public's right to know, serves history's ability to judge. So Trump's procedural challenges are failing, and the filing remains public, remains part of the record, remains available for anyone to read. The political implications are massive, because this filing gives ammunition to Trump's opponents, gives them evidence-based arguments about Trump's conduct, about his crimes, about why he shouldn't be trusted with power, and Democrats are going to use it, are going to cite the filing, are going to quote the evidence, are going to use Trump's own private admissions against him. And for swing voters, for independents, this matters. This is a prosecutor laying out evidence, not just political attacks. And that has credibility, has power to change minds, has ability to affect how people view Trump and Republicans, and that's going to have electoral consequences. Republican responses have been scattered. Some are defending Trump, claiming the filing is political, attacking Smith, dismissing the evidence. But others are quiet, are uncomfortable, are reading the filing and seeing the evidence and realizing it's bad, realizing Trump really did what he's accused of. And while they might not say so publicly, that discomfort matters, affects their willingness to defend Trump, affects their enthusiasm for his agenda, affects whether they're willing to go to bat for him politically. And that erosion of support, even if subtle, it weakens Trump, makes him less effective, makes his presidency more difficult. The filing also creates legal jeopardy for co-conspirators, people who helped Trump, who executed various schemes, who provided legal advice or organizational support. They're identified in the filing, their conduct is documented, and they can be prosecuted. They don't have presidential immunity, can face charges now, and prosecutors might use that leverage, might charge some of them to pressure others to cooperate, to testify against Trump, to provide more evidence. And that strategy could work because people facing prison time, they often choose to cooperate, choose to tell the truth, choose to protect themselves rather than protect Trump. And that could lead to even more evidence, even more testimony, even stronger cases against Trump in the future. So let's break down what Jack Smith's new filing means. why it has the White House in panic, what the implications are legally, politically, historically. Because this isn't just another court document, this is comprehensive evidence of presidential crimes. This is documentation of attempted coup. This is a record that will define how Trump's presidency is remembered. First, the legal significance. Smith has created a roadmap for future prosecution, has documented the evidence, has laid out the legal theories, has shown how Trump's conduct meets elements of various crimes. And when Trump leaves office, when immunity ends, prosecutors can use this roadmap, can file new charges, can pursue convictions. And Smith has made it easier for them, has done much of the work, has interviewed witnesses and collected documents and organized evidence. So future prosecutors aren't starting from scratch. They're picking up where Smith left off. And that makes successful prosecution more likely, makes accountability more achievable, makes the prospect of Trump facing consequences more real. Second, Trump's private admissions. The fact that Trump privately called Powell's claims crazy while publicly promoting them, that's devastating. That shows consciousness of guilt, shows Trump knew he was lying. And that knowledge is crucial for proving criminal intent, because defendants often claim they genuinely believe their false statements, claim they were mistaken, rather than lying. But when you have evidence of private admissions contradicting public claims, that defense fails. That shows you knew you were lying. And Trump's lawyers know this, know these admissions make prosecution much easier, make conviction more likely, and that's why the White House is panicking, because these admissions might be the most damaging evidence in the entire filing. Third, the pattern of conduct. Smith doesn't just document isolated incidents, he shows a pattern, shows Trump trying multiple strategies to overturn the election, shows desperation increasing as each strategy failed, shows willingness to break laws and norms to stay in power. And patterns matter legally. They show intent, show planning, show that conduct wasn't accidental or mistaken, but deliberate and systematic. And juries respond to patterns, see them as proof of guilt, as evidence that defendant knew what they were doing was wrong. So Smith's documentation of Trump's pattern of conduct, that's powerful. That's exactly what prosecutors need to win convictions. Fourth, the co-conspirator angle. By identifying multiple people involved in Trump's schemes, Smith creates pressure, creates opportunities to flip witnesses. Because people facing their own charges often choose to cooperate, choose to testify against leaders in exchange for leniency. And Trump's co-conspirators are vulnerable, can be charged, can face prison time, and many of them probably don't want to go to prison for Trump, don't want to sacrifice their own freedom to protect him. So prosecutors can use that, can offer deals, can get testimony, and each cooperating witness makes the case against Trump stronger, provides more evidence, corroborates other testimony, makes conviction more certain. Fifth, the immunity question. Smith argues Trump's conduct wasn't covered by presidential immunity, wasn't official acts. And that argument matters, because if courts accept it, if they agree that attempting to overturn an election isn't an official presidential duty, then Trump can be prosecuted. Then immunity doesn't protect him. And Smith's detailed legal analysis supports that conclusion, makes the case that what Trump did was criminal conspiracy, not presidential action. In future courts deciding whether to allow prosecution, they're going to consider Smith's arguments, going to use his analysis, and that makes it more likely Trump can be held accountable. Sixth, the political damage. This filing hurts Trump politically, gives Democrats ammunition, gives swing voters reasons to oppose him, shows that Trump really did try to overturn the election, really did engage in criminal conduct. And while Trump's base might not care, independents do. Swing voters do. People who aren't already committed to Trump, they read this evidence and conclude he's unfit, conclude he broke laws, conclude they can't support him, and that's going to affect elections, going to make it harder for Republicans in competitive districts, going to cost Trump support he needs, and Republicans know this, know the filing creates political problems, and they're panicking because they don't know how to contain the damage. Seventh, the historical record. Even if Trump is never prosecuted, even if he somehow avoids accountability, Smith's filing ensures history knows the truth, knows what Trump did, knows the evidence against him, knows he tried to overturn democracy, and that matters because history judges presidencies, shapes how we understand our past, and Smith has ensured that judgment will be based on facts, on evidence compiled by a prosecutor who spent years investigating, who saw all the evidence, who interviewed all the witnesses, and who concluded Trump committed crimes. That record is permanent, can't be erased, can't be spun away, and it will define Trump's legacy as one of the most corrupt presidents in American history. Eighth, the White House strategy problem. Trump's team has to respond to Smith's filing, has to say something, but they're stuck. Can't admit Trump did what Smith alleges because that's admitting crimes. Can't deny it effectively because the evidence is too strong. Can't attack Smith without looking defensive, so they're just throwing everything at the wall, claiming it's political, claiming it's premature, claiming it's improper, but none of that is working. because the evidence speaks for itself, because Smith followed proper procedures, because courts are rejecting Trump's challenges. So the White House is flailing, is panicking, is unable to control the narrative, and that panic is visible. Invisibility matters politically, makes Trump look weak, makes voters question his leadership. Ninth, what happens next? More filings might come. Smith might release additional information. Other prosecutors might file their own cases based on Smith's evidence. Congressional investigations might demand Smith's materials, and each new revelation, each new filing, each new piece of evidence, it keeps Trump's crimes in the news, keeps damaging him politically, keeps building the case for future prosecution, and Trump can't stop it, can't prevent Smith from making the record, can't prevent other prosecutors from using the evidence, can't prevent history from judging him. So the damage is going to continue, going to compound, going to make Trump's position weaker and weaker. 10th, the bottom line. Jack Smith's new filing documents, presidential crimes, shows Trump tried to overturn democracy, proves Trump knew he lost and lied about it, creates roadmap for future prosecution, damages Trump politically, ensures historical record reflects truth. And there's nothing Trump can do about it, can't suppress the evidence, can't silence the witnesses, can't prevent accountability forever. And that's why the White House is panicking, because they know what's coming. Know that when Trump leaves office, when immunity ends, prosecution resumes. Know that Smith's evidence will be used against Trump. Know that conviction is likely. And they're terrified, because Trump has spent his life avoiding consequences, has always found ways to escape accountability. But this time, the evidence is too strong, the documentation too complete, the legal theories too sound. This time, accountability might actually arrive, and Trump and his team know it, and they're panicking, because they can see the walls closing in, can see the end game, can see that Trump's ability to avoid consequences is finally failing. We'll keep covering every development, every new filing, every revelation, every step toward accountability, because this is historic. This is a former president documented as having committed crimes. This is evidence that could lead to the first conviction of an American president. And watching it unfold, watching the legal process work, watching accountability approach, despite all of Trump's efforts to avoid it, that matters. That's democracy functioning. That's rule of law being enforced. Stay tuned.